got to the meat of it. Due to the reduced demand from our customer base, we will have to continue to cut costs. However, at this time, there will be no job layoffs. Oh! Rich out loud expressed his relief. He still had a job. Then he kept reading. However, because of the reduced demand, effectively, we will reduce all full-time employee hours from 38 hours a week to 32. 32 hours. Rich looked at the neatly stacked bills filed between the salt and pepper shaker on the kitchen table and began repeating, 32 hours. How is this going to be possible? They were just managing to survive as it was. 32 hours. How was it possible that they would continue to be able to pay their bills and stay afloat? This picture came in Rich's mind of this large funnel that slowly was spinning him and his family around, down, 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 and where would it stop? 32 hours. That is reality for many of us this morning. And if it's not ours personally, it's the reality of those we know. It's the reality of college students trying to figure out how to pay for one more semester. It's the reality of a young couple trying to save for a down payment for their first house in a down economy. It's the reality of a couple with another mouth to feed. It's the reality of pensioners trying to figure out how to stretch that penny a little farther when they thought they had stretched it as far as it would go. It's the reality of people whose benefits have been reduced or eliminated. It's reality. What do we do in that kind of a situation? This morning, as we continue our series, How To, we're looking at how do we cope with less financially. And I'd like to say at the very beginning, we're talking about an emergency situation. We're not talking about long-term management of money, being good stewards or managers of our money, which actually it all belongs to God. We're talking about how are we going to make it through the rest of this year financially, or how are we going to make it through this year and the next year, a comparatively short amount of time where drastic measures must be taken. How will we deal with this reality? It's emergency. Hospitals have emergency crews. I remember the first hospital that I visited in, several times I heard this come over the loudspeaker system. Code blue 452, code blue 123. So I asked my medical expert, which is my wife, Lucy, I said, what does this code blue mean? And she said, well, that means that someone has coded in the hospital. Someone's heart has stopped beating, someone has quit breathing, and a specially designated emergency team is now being directed to that area. If it's a doctor and visiting a patient, the doctor says goodbye to the patient and immediately goes to that room. If it's a nurse eating lunch, the nurse gets up from the table and runs to the room. If it's a technician reading charts, that technician just drops it and goes. In fact, I have seen one team rush by me in the halls. Now, they no longer say that today because people are aware of those words, but it still is true. Every hospital has an emergency team when someone's life is in danger, goes to it. And that's what we're talking about today, financial emergency. How do we cope? I'm going to save the words that Jesus speaks in this situation till a little later. But the one verse I would just like to say, Matthew 6:33, which is part of what we're looking at today, seek first God's kingdom and his righteousness, and all these things, referring to physical needs, financial needs, all these things will be added to you as well. So God's promise is that he will provide and God will take care of us. However, having recognized that truth, that doesn't mean that we just sit there and wait for God to work. We just say, go ahead, God, do your thing, I'll just wait. No, it may mean we have to work even farther. So in a practical way, what can we do to cope with less? Let's take Rich, our example at the beginning, and say that he was making $50,000 a year. That may be more for some of us, that may be less. Let's just say $50,000. The reduction of his hours from 40 to 38 to 32 means he's making 20% less income. Could you make it on 20% less of what you bring in? Some of us would be able to scrape by. Others of us would have real difficulty. So 20% of 50 is $10,000. We need to find $10,000. But before we do that, let's try it a different way. There are only two things we can do. If we have less income, either we have to find more income or we have to reduce our expenditures. It may be that we need to find more income. In that emergency situation, we may need to find another job. I remember 12 or so years ago when our kids were rounding the corner to head towards college, I came to the conclusion that I wasn't making enough money for college for them. Even them having loans, I just was not making the money. So I had to consider another job. What other job could I do? It's a good question. What other job could fit in with the hours that I was spending in the work of being a minister? So what presented itself pretty quickly was delivering newspapers. Get up about 3 in the morning, go to get the papers, bundle them together, get them distributed. I'd be done by 7:30 or 8 o'clock. That would be a killer, I recognized, up at 3 every day, but at least I could do it. Fortunately, and I still praise God for this, at that particular time, the congregation where I was serving, the church leaders and congregation became embarrassed enough at what they were paying us for salary as pastors that they committed to a 5-year program to increase our salaries. And over 7 years, my income increased 50%. So I was not needing another job. But finding jobs is tough in this economy. And besides, what we're looking at is how do we cope with less. So let's look at the other side. We have reduced income. What can we do? Well, I'm relying on 2 Christian financial planners and experts, George Foshee and Ron Blue, for some of what I'm going to say. They point out that there are really only 5 things we can do with the income that we have. The first is the first category of what we can do with our income. You all will know immediately because we live in the wonderful state of New Jersey, which is known above all for taxes. Kevin, let's get that taxes up there. Oh, I'm sorry. I've changed it since the first service. Could I ask you to go forward several till you get to taxes? Yeah, I forgot about the fact if I changed my sermon, I didn't. Okay, here we go. The 5 ways we can spend our income. The first is taxes. The next slide. The next category is debt reduction. And since debt is a legal obligation, a financial obligation, we're not going to talk now about reducing the debt that we owe. We need to work on that. But the second category is debt reduction, but we're not going to talk about that. So we have taxes, we have debt reduction. The third one is going to be savings. Savings are always very important, but remember we're in an emergency situation where we don't have enough money to make it. We're going to need to find $10,000. For the short term then, we're not going to talk about savings. The fourth category is giving. That's another thing we can do with our money. And when the emergency strikes, we'll have to, in prayer and conversation with God, figure out, do we still give at the same level in trust? Do we reduce it? What do we do? I'll come back to that just briefly towards the end. But we're not going to talk about that. Before we get to the last category, let me just say this about taxes. Just a little word. There's only one day a year where it makes sense to spend money in order to get a tax deduction or tax credit. Anybody know what that day is? April 15th. That's tax day. Let me give you an illustration. Last year and part of the year before, if you bought an energy-efficient door or window, the government would give you a 30% tax credit on the cost of the window. Isn't that great? Or door. That's great. So on April 15th, you go through your personal papers and all your tax stuff, and you say, wait a minute, whatever I spent for the door or window, I can take 30% of that expense, and I can get a tax credit, the same amount, and I can write that off on my taxes, reduce taxes. That's wonderful on April 15th. But the other 364 days of the year, we've got to figure out how to come up with the other 70% of the cost of the window or the door. It doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense. There we go. To do that. So we're not going to worry about debt reduction, and we're not going to spend anything hoping to get a tax deduction or a credit, because we'll have to spend more money to get it. So that only leaves one category, and that has to do with lifestyle. Supporting our own lifestyle. We all have our own lifestyles, right? We have houses, we have apartments, we have cars, we have clothes, we have food. All that stuff that we have is part of our own unique lifestyle. And so this is where we are going to concentrate. Can I get your mic? No, just get your mic. All righty, so, testing. Oh, it's back on. Great, okay. Sorry, Sean, thank you. So, supporting our own lifestyle, where are we going to find, in an emergency situation, a reduction of $10,000? Now, I just want to say that one more time, because you're going to be tempted to throw tomatoes at me. Just want you to know that. And I don't want to hide behind the lectern. But this is an emergency situation. Steve, don't get the tomatoes yet. This is an emergency situation. Rest of this year, maybe through the year after, what are we going to do? Step one, you ready for this? Sell the car. If you have more than one car, sell the other car. You will get an immediate $1,000 savings on insurance, plus or minus. You won't have to spend for the gasoline $500 or $600. You will have to spend more for the other car you have for that gas. Sell or don't use the car. Will this be inconvenient? Absolutely. Can you imagine having to try and find people to carpool to work with, people you'd probably rather not spend any time with? And now you're going to go to work with them and come back to work with them? Absolutely, it's inconvenient. Will your kids be taken places that they don't want to go? You bet. Will they complain? Yes, they will. Will they cry? Probably. If they're older, will they roll their eyes? They're past rolling their eyes. But I'm telling you, this is an emergency situation. We're trying to find $10,000. Where are we going to find it? Car is one. That should save, in my estimation, with repairs, $2,000 right off the top. Number two, take vacation. All the vacation to which you are entitled, take it, but pay no money for hotel rooms and pay no money for airfare. Instead, go camping, or if camping isn't your style, take vacations, day vacations from your home. Go Longwood Gardens, go to Lancaster County, go to Philadelphia for the day, and then come home. That's your vacation. Spend the night in your own home where it costs you nothing. But have fun with this. Say that you would love to go to Hawaii. Well, you can't go to Hawaii, obviously, but make an Hawaiian theme in your home. Go out and buy a couple of real cheap tiki lamps and light them at home, outside, please. Buy a pineapple from the store and put it in your center table, and after dinner, figure out how you cut this thing that comes from Hawaii. And please buy grass skirts, get on YouTube, and look how they instruct you how to do the hula dance, and have fun as a family or by yourself, and work on hulaing. Have fun. Vacations are fun. You don't have to spend money. I figure, how much would that save us? Another $1,000 anyway, so we're at $3,000 already. Next one. Sell or get rid of your cell phone.